And with me today, I have Mr. Sam Ronan. If you do not know who he is a 27-year-old Air Force veteran from our very own state of Ohio and a Wright State alum. He was considered the dark horse candidate to be the chairperson of the DNC, making his case by debating Minnesota Congressman Keith Ellison and former Obama Labor Secretary Tom Perez on national television, specifically CNN. I had to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, it's all good, man.
Yeah. Although he was unsuccessful in his venture, he brought up one of the key issues, that being money in politics.
Yeah, and I've been in talks with Dan Enter, New 535. I've been talking to California, or Bernie Kratz of California. I mean, you name a movement, I've probably talked to somebody with it.
Okay. Where'd you get your start in politics?
Well, the funny thing is, I only got interested in politics because of the government shutdown in 2013. So this was actually a little bit before the time of Bernie Sanders and his rise in popularity. I got involved because the government shutdown devastated our newly recovering economy and affected millions of people with the furlough. It affected the military with the sequester. And we were all called in one day to be told that we all signed a contract and Uncle Sam's calling in his dues today.
I remember when the government shutdown happened, and I believe it was like by October 1st that we default. And I was talking about that with my family one time at dinner. And just before dinner, we were listening to this song by Django Django, Default. And my mom was like, was that a precursor to what's going on right now? Because it just kept saying default, default. And when I first saw that the government shut down, it was shut down by Ted Cruz when what he was trying to do was a pipe dream.
And let's not forget John Boehner either.
John Boehner basically said, yeah, no, we're not shutting down the government. No, that's the last thing we want. But what Ted Cruz wanted to do is a pipe dream because at the time Democrats had the Senate. And does anyone really think President Obama is going to repeal the Affordable Care Act? I mean, it's kind of like pie in the sky. And even Rand Paul, it costs more to shut down the government than to keep it open. And then, you had various right-wing news sources saying, Ted Cruz was courageous. And no, Ted Cruz was stupid.
Well, I mean, he completely violated the Constitution. I mean, he is supposed to be working with the President of the United States. The whole point of our Constitution and our three-tiered system is that there's a checks and balances. And if you try and, leverage your weight to upset that check and balance, then you're violating the premise of the entire thing. Plus, you're trying to overstep your own bounds. So, yeah, Ted Cruz, he definitely far exceeded, overstepped his bounds, and he hasn't changed his tack ever since. That's the problem. Then, of course, the Republicans are now more sensationalized to the right more than ever before with the likes of Donald Trump and his administration.
Yeah, when he first came out and said, I'm running for president, I thought it was going to be one of those, he might try it, and if he doesn't do well, I thought it was going to be like a flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea that he was going to be president.
And see, that's the thing, too. Both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump did exactly what they needed to do this year, which was appeal to populism. Mm-hmm. And no other candidates really did it well other than those two. Now, granted, Trump's populism appealed to the racism, the hatred, the bigotry, the fear, all the negative things in society. Whereas Bernie Sanders appealed to the hope, the inspiration, the building and working together. And that actually did cross party lines. The problem was that the powers that be on both sides didn't want either of those messages to be heard. For better or for worse, the RNC, though, they just let whatever happened happen. I mean, to give them credit where credit is due, they weren't happy with Trump. Nobody was happy with Trump, but they swallowed that crow. They ate it, and they supported him. Whereas the Democratic Party put their thumb on the scales and utterly denied Bernie Sanders.
When I saw that, and when I saw the big divide between, obviously you have, the libertarian part of the party, then you have the evangelical part, and then you have the establishment part. And when I first saw it, and I thought the GOP had a civil war. I mean, come on.
Well, the weird thing is the Civil War did occur in the GOP, but it wasn't that the winner emerged and everybody else got in line. It was more so that the GOP has always been the party of, at the end of the day, we're going to support our guy no matter who that is, no matter how distasteful or much we dislike the person. Whereas liberals and progressives and those of us with more opinions, I guess, we always want the cake and to eat it. We always want our new idea. We want to be the voice. We want to be the hero. And unfortunately, that causes fragmentation to a greater degree in the Democratic Party. And it was something I tried addressing during the DNC chair race. It's not that progressives are correct and that the establishment is wrong. And it's not that the establishment is so utterly corrupt or whatever. It's all of that and none of that. When people aren't being taken seriously, when equity isn't truly given, and I explained this on CNN, it's not enough to have caucuses for all the minority groups. It's not enough to have committees because intrinsically it's limited. You're saying that these 10 caucuses get to come up with their 3 ideas and then submit 30 to the executive committee who chooses 5.
Yeah.
Quintessentially, that isn't equity, and that doesn't improve anybody's voice other than those 5 topics that got chosen. What I was trying to talk about was truly being and embracing the concept of everyone, the 99%, the party of the people. We are poised more so now than ever at any time in our history to truly embrace the 99%.
Yeah.
The Republican Party is so in bed, so far gone with Wall Street that they're not even trying to hide it anymore. I mean, the Affordable Care Act repeal that they just came up with gives tax breaks to insurance companies, devastates insurance policy holders, and then it basically ensures that a quarter of the population will die within the next several years.
I saw some update that one of the key provisions is defunding Planned Parenthood, and they're also cutting funding to mental health programs.
Right. And they're rolling back the Medicaid extension. They're raising the age to receive both Medicare and Social Security benefits. Instead of getting fined at the end of the year for not having insurance, you're getting fined 30% additional costs to your monthly premiums if you go 2 months without coverage. So they're taking the mandate and making it even worse. They're cutting back the provisions for, the subsidies. They're getting rid of the subsidies. So those insurance plans that were $800 but subsidized down about $50 or $60 a month, now you're paying the full $800 again.
Oh my goodness.
So people that voted for the Trump administration have seriously been lied to and cheated. And the problem is saying that is only going to push them further into the right because, well, I'm not wrong. You're just trying to be a whatever. So the issue is not so much highlighting all the failures and shortcomings and horrendous actions that the GOP has taken. It's highlighting what could be done instead. People don't want to fight against something. People want to fight for something. And that's what I tried conveying in the DNC chair race. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm trying to build something that we can all work together with and use to start taking back democracy.
Okay, when and why did you make the decision to run for chairperson of the DNC?
So the why and the when was actually the same day. After the election, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to go back to active duty, if I was going to get involved with politics. But then eventually the DNC chair race came on our radar, and they said I should go look at it. So I did. And they being like my county chairman, she said that I should check that out. So I did. I went there and I listened to everybody speaking. There was like 4 candidates at this point. And I liked everything I saw. I liked everything I heard. All the answers were great about how they were going to reform the party, except for this one most important question. What are you going to do to bring people back into the party? And every candidate there gave a stump. They gave some platitudinal answer. When all they had to do was get up off their chair, step off the platform, and hand the microphone to somebody and say, what can we do as a party? What can we do to bring you back? What have we done wrong? And what would you want from us so that you are more included and involved? It would have been that simple. An actual leader emerging and taking on the ownership of leadership. Admitting that there are faults within the party, that there are things that can be done better and things that were done completely wrong. And we need to have that discussion. And if we don't, which we're not, by the way, if you haven't noticed, we're still burying our heads in the sand and we're still blaming Russia. And we're still not opening our doors. The Democrats.org still doesn't have a directory for just even your state party leadership or who's the contact information for the executive committee. There is no transparency still, despite all that has been going on.
In terms of, like, when we were talking about the establishment, they announced the Republican replacement for Reince Priebus in about 10 seconds. It's actually Mitt Romney's niece. And when I saw the affiliation with Romney and the Republican Party, I'm like, oh no, we're just going to continue this Wall Street stuff. But when you saw the success of like Ron Paul, Bernie Sanders, in my opinion, was kind of like the 2016 version of Ron Paul. Like all young people loved him. People thought he made a lot of sense. And the thing is, he didn't take money from anyone. He didn't take money from people like the Koch brothers or George Soros. And another thing where I saw when it comes to Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders is through the media, Bernie got screwed.
Oh, yeah.
And next question. On national television, you debated well-known Democrats such as Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota and Tom Perez, Labor Secretary, am I correct? President Obama. What was it like being in their company at only 27 years old?
It's funny. I get asked that question quite often. And the interesting thing about that is maybe it still hasn't clicked for me, but I was on that debate stage as a peer, as an equal to those folks. So it did not even occur to me that I was talking to a congressman or to a former Secretary of Labor, an 8-year Secretary of Labor at that. That I was on the same stage as political heavyweights who have been doing this for as long or longer than I've been alive. So to be on that same stage with them is more so symbolic, I think, than anything else, because it proves even more so. You don't have to have all this experience. You don't have to be this political figure to be able to say what needs to be said. The problem is, despite all that political acumen that was on that stage, they hadn't taken the initiative to step up and do the things that need to be done. Now, I have mad love for Keith Ellison and Tom Perez. I think they're great individuals. I think they're great leaders. I think, though, they have an opportunity to truly shine and truly prove themselves. And what I was waiting for them to do was to do precisely that. I am still more than happy to work with the DNC. I'm still more than happy to work with those two individuals. I'm more than happy to do my part to reform the party. But the thing is, they have to be willing to do it. If all they do is take me in and try and make me be the poster boy for millennials in the Democratic Party, I'm going to turn that down. Because that's what they did to Keith Ellison. He's the progressive voice, give us money. That's within a couple of days of him being the co-chair. He sent an email with his video asking for money. That's not what people wanted. People wanted reform. People want a voice. And until the party's willing to give it to them, they're going to continue to hemorrhage support. They're going to continue to lose elections. They're going to continue to lose relevancy in the national stage, which is a big problem because in a duopoly, if only one side falls, the other fills the void. And I don't think I need to tell you in any form of hyperbole that the Trump administration acquiring more power is something that we simply cannot afford.
I found that it was I believe an article, I believe it was in The Intercept or The Atlantic, that now the CIA can spy on you through your car and smart television.
If you're referring to Bolt 7, I'm still a reservist, so I haven't looked at it, and I'm not allowed to look at it. Some of that information is still classified or sensitive material information. That being said, the concerns that Vault 7 brings to the forefront are very clear. They are very present, and they do need to be addressed. There needs to be some sort of committee or action or something that we as people or our government leaders can do to address those concerns, because the initial need for the whatever that act was during the Bush administration that allowed
Patriot Act?
The Patriot Act that allowed that to happen in the first place. Its time has came and gone. We're no longer needing that level of security and scrutiny. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need to protect our information and that the CIA doesn't need to do its job. What I am saying is that having a vast pool of information on citizenry is more indicative of a dictatorship than a democracy.
And when it came to like privacy rights and how people just want to be left alone overall.
Right. And I understand the need to make sure that maybe not necessarily profiling, but taking proactive action instead of reactive action. There are some people who are more inclined to acts of violence, and that can be determined through a pattern of behavior, be it through social media, purchasing actions, stuff like that. Like if you're a 9-to-5er and you're an accountant and you do that for 20 years and all of a sudden you start buying, assault weapons, thousands of rounds of ammo, and all these other things.
It's pretty fishy.
That's a little question. But that being said, where's the line to be drawn? And I obviously don't have the answer to that. What I am saying is that there needs to be a methodology that doesn't necessarily violate our own civil liberties.
Okay. In the debate, you mentioned getting money on politics. Mm-hmm. What harm do you believe money in politics brings, and why do you believe we need to get rid of money in politics?
So that answer is a very simple answer. Money in politics, as in the fact that money exists in politics in of itself isn't the problem. It's who has the money and who is giving it out. If we were funding our own political campaign or party or whatever, and it was the party of the 99%. It was our money influencing the decisions of people. We wouldn't be having this conversation, right? The problem is that it's corporatism and lobbyists and private interests that are doing it. That is a problem, because when public servants no longer serve the public, then who do they serve? What is the Constitution there to protect them? And so that's the problem. And we need to get businesses and corporations and lobbyists out of money. I would make it illegal outright, revoke Citizens United or something along those lines. What we should be doing is having open elections, free elections, where it's sponsored through the state, the local, and the national levels, respectively, and that only people who meet, there's supposed to be a minimum in signatures or whatever, but you should be able to win or lose an election based on your own merits and credibility. That still doesn't mean that I would even win an election, because all I've done is talk about things that are broken and wrong, but I'm 27 years old and I was enlisted 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. I don't exactly have the credibility or clout. I do have the right ideas. So it'll be a matter of proving it. But even so, even that notwithstanding, when people are held accountable to their constituency as opposed to their donors, our political processes improve. And that's historically proven. After World War II, we were the envy of the world. Why? Because we took care of our people. And there was greater than 50 or 60% of military background in leadership. There was a sense of service and duty and commitment to the Constitution and the American people in office. Whereas now it's less than, some sources say 17%, others say 12%. It really depends on how broad of a spectrum you want to make it. But suffice to say, we're getting closer and closer to single-digit military background and more lawyers and bankers and financiers rather than people. Where's the teachers? Where's the scientists? Where's the actual engineers and the writers? Where's the regular people in office? And the problem is the money. We can't have regular people in office because they can't afford to run. They can't afford to campaign. They don't have the tools and resources to gather volunteers, supplies, and fundraising. That's what I'm talking about. We need to take the whole principle of money dedicating whether or not you win or lose out of there, on top of the corporate and private interests.
I saw when you mentioned bankers and financiers, it reminded me of Trump's cabinet, since he had people from Goldman Sachs. He even had people, even Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, when Trump said, basically said he put on the populist facade saying, I'm looking out for the people, yet he has the wealthiest cabinet in history.
And not only that, every single cabinet member is the antithesis to the cabinet position. Betsy DeVos, prime example. Ben Carson, prime example. Ben Tillerson, prime example. About the only cabinet picks that make an ounce of sense are General Mattis for SecDef, and it is SecDef.
Yeah, Secretary of Defense.
And Elon Musk for, I forgot what he was.
He's in the cabinet?
Yeah, he got.
I did not know that.
Wait, and at least he got tagged to be considered.
I'm going to Google that.
Yeah, please do, because those are literally and I think former General Petraeus is also tapped for one of the positions. At least those three people are at least trying to look out for the greater good. Now, there's the negatives of General Mattis and General Petraeus because they were generals in the military and they oversaw the war. But suffice to say, they're at least competent and they're not deliberately trying to undermine the cabinet position they got picked for. So you're right. And this goes back to our other thing about how Republican voters or voters who chose to vote for Trump, they're just having the wool pulled over their eyes. And the fact of the matter is, telling them that isn't sufficient because they can't not see it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's either not wanting to come to terms with it or admitting it, or it's just we have to find a different way to approach it. It's just attacking the man isn't working. It's only solidifying his base. It's like, no, you're just calling us stupid and ignorant. It's like, you're right, we are just doing that. So let us show you why these decisions are really going to negatively impact you. The problem is education. And I'm not saying that they're stupid. I'm saying that the education, the knowledge of what these policies are going to do is a problem. And part of that comes from mainstream media.
When I saw that Trump pulling the wool over his eyes, of course. He's basically telling people what they wanted to hear. A lot of politicians want to hide the racism, and
he's fully embracing it. Yeah. The thing is, Trump is a caricature of cruelty and evil in a leader. Yeah. He is a caricature of Hitler and Stalin and all of the other dictators throughout history. He's just a caricature of it. That's the thing. He's so ludicrously obnoxious about his ignorance that it seems like it would be a sitcom. It would be like a post-apocalyptic comedy, but except he's the actual leader of the free world.
came off, basically ever since he came off, as I told a friend of mine, like, this is just one giant episode of South Park.
Right, that just won't end, and Kenny keeps dying every day. and now it's in more ludicrous ways. Like, honestly, South Park doesn't even have to make any more episodes. All I have to do is videotape what's going on in the United States. And that, to me, is the most terrifying thing, because we have a 20% investment in the rest of the world. What happens in the United States affects 7 billion people. And when 7 billion people are affected by fear, terrorism, oligarchy, corruption, and all that good stuff, it is a big freaking deal. And I'm trying to do my part to combat that. Now, that doesn't mean, I do intend to run for office. I am trying to work with the party. I'm trying to work with the entire progressive movement. I'm trying to get people to share their information. Because the only way we combat this administration, to put it nicely, is we have to start winning elections at all levels, and we have to undermine those cruel and oppressive efforts and initiatives that he's passing. The No Ban, No Wall, we saw California governors and we saw New York legislators fight that tooth and nail, and we saw all this activism occur. It's just these activism organizations, these different progressive movements, they rise, they fall, and then they let it go. We need to keep that pressure up, and we need to start sharing information. The more unified we can be as a population now, more than ever, we can actually affect change. And that's the thing. People are either unwilling to understand that, or that they're not truly realizing that concept, that if you share this tool that you've been building on for a year or two, this list of names or these vetted names or this fundraising mechanism, and you share it with the other people who have been doing the same thing, and you share it, and then you finally have this big network doing the same thing but not duplicating efforts. That's
like, when it comes to money in politics, even a former president, Jimmy Carter, said, yeah, we're becoming an oligarchy with unlimited donations.
Unlimited legalized political corruption. I mean, that's the right word. Political
collusion.
Well, collusion. But what is it when you pay off a politician? I forget the word right now.
Bribery.
Unlimited political bribery. That is what we have right now in the form of lobbyism. And you know what's worse about that?
What?
The part that gets me the most. These senators and congressmen are selling out their constituents for pennies on the dollar. A congressman in my district, OH1, has about 167,000 voters, so that would probably be about 300,000 people, right? These people are accepting $20,000 bribes to give kickbacks to the oil company in the form of billions of dollars in tax breaks. $30,000, which isn't even 10 cents per person in your district, to give them billions of dollars in kickbacks. They're making thousands of percents of profit. People aren't even doing corruption, though. They're selling themselves far too short, and it's disgusting how weak and cowardly our leadership is.
During that same debate, you also talked about the Democratic primaries being an insider's game.
Oh.
In your mind, what makes them an insider's game?
Well, I mean, look at the DNC chair race itself. Those DNC delegates are chosen by the state the state delegates who are chosen by the county delegates. That's insiders right there. Second of all, the information to run and contact the DNC and the secretary's office isn't even readily available. They also told me that they don't even check their messages, because I did leave messages, both online and on phone. It's an insider's game because whoever the establishment choice is for whatever run is the one who gets all the support. The ODP told us verbatim, all of the state representative candidates in the room. I mean, it's an insider's game within an insider's game. And it's not that all of it is ill-intended. I mean, there is such thing as too much openness in that if you always ask the 50 million Democrats to make a decision, when we see how fragmented the progressive movement is, nothing would ever get done. So I get the need to have a hierarchy. But they don't even have a structure. They don't have a hierarchy either. Because the DNC members themselves didn't even know who their fellow DNC members were within their own state. Caucus members don't have their own mailing lists. Some of it is, I have been told, is done on purpose, which makes no sense to me. What we need is a true organization structure. And I imagine if you brought somebody from the RNC over here in the leadership structure, that they would tell you, it's like, oh yeah, we have a mailing list, a call list. We know exactly who's in charge of what, who to call for this, that, and the other. We simply don't have structure. We are a national organization with no centralization. And that is exactly why we're failing. And that's exactly why it's an insider's game, because the only people with the information are the ones with the need to know.
And I remember when you mentioned primaries and caucuses, how during how Debbie Wasserman Schultz basically rigged the entire thing. and how tried to basically turn every primary into a closed primary. So basically, you had to be a registered Democrat in order to vote in the Democratic Party. When you saw in the pattern, if it's an open party, then Hillary gets slaughtered.
Right. And I will defend the closed primary insofar as you don't want Republicans or outsiders sabotaging your own campaign, right? You wouldn't want, like the military, right? You wouldn't just open your doors to your enemy and say, hey, you can have a decision on how we're going to attack it. That's the only argument I can make that justifies having a closed primary. That being said, if we're going to do an open primary and registration isn't a factor, then we do need to make sure that we at least get the best foot forward, or we at least get the right people onto the ballot. Because that's the point of a primary, is to get the best candidate onto the ballot, the best candidate that has a chance of winning. Unfortunately, that usually translates to who can fundraise the most, but we've also seen that doesn't necessarily make you an inspiring individual. And that isn't just, this isn't talking about Hillary Clinton. Her issue was she's been attacked for the past 30 years. Her smear campaign was off the chain against her, and it was multifaceted from the mainstream media, the Republican Party, and even offices within the federal government. There were maybe a few other things that she could have done better, like not picking Tim Kaine to be her VP.
Oh, God.
But beyond that, I mean, Hillary Clinton, her resume stands on its own merit. But that being said, there are plenty of other establishment candidates out there who were literally just money shills, and it was belligerently obvious that they were literally the chosen one because they were millionaires or they had the most money. So the primary question is, I would think something like ranked choice voting would be a way to solve that. Yeah. That way, even if you do have the saboteurs, what are they going to sabotage? They're still going to have to select somebody or vote for one person, and everybody else is going to pick the rack and stack. I think ranked voting would be the best solution for the open primary.
What exactly is ranked voting?
So ranked voting, and this actually kind of goes into what I'm trying to accomplish too, but ranked voting is specifically if you're going to all run for Congress, right? You've got 4 people. Right now, you can only vote for one person, but you really like this one other guy or gal, like this one other candidate. If you could, you would definitely vote for them as well. Ranked voting gives you that opportunity. You say, this guy is the number 1 pick and this guy is the number 2 pick. And, you know, if there's 4 candidates you don't like the other 2, then you don't have to vote for them.
When you mentioned when it comes to ranking whom you really like in terms of candidates, I'm on paper I'm Republican, but even though I disagree with 90% of what they stand for, but basically I'm like Republican with a libertarian streak, so that's why I was in heavy support for Rand Paul. And the thing is, I really didn't like the rest of the party because, I mean, you had Jeb Bush, who basically just came off as basically a schoolgirl. You had Margaret.
Jeb Bush was supposed to be the anointed one for the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. He was supposed to be the dynasty, which, thank goodness, he didn't. But also, damn, I wish he would have, because I would much rather have Jeb Bush in office right now than Trump.
Yeah, and then you had Ben Carson, who looks like he's sleeping 98% of the time, and Ted Cruz, who just comes off as just super smarmy. And he's blaming, the media blames me. It's like, no, you shut down the government.
And there's no question about it.
And the thing is, when it comes to, and then Marco Rubio, even my mom said he looks like an 8th grader. Because he is so babyface. Then you had like Scott Walker, who was utterly boring. And his approval rating right now in the state of Wisconsin is somewhere around like 30 to 31%. He is deeply hated in his state.
Well, yeah, look at the crap he's been doing. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, though. And like you said, you say you're a Republican even though you disagree with 90% of the thing. That means you're either not Republican, but that doesn't make you libertarian or liberal or Democratic or whatever. That's the problem. Our identity politics is the biggest issue. We feel like we have to split ourselves into this group or the other. That's why I'm trying to transcend that with what I'm trying to do, which is build a database with all this information and the opportunity to volunteer. So either volunteer as a candidate or volunteer to support a campaign. The problem isn't that we can't have a conversation, because clearly we can. The problem is that conversation isn't happening, and we feel as though because I'm a D and you're an R, that we're not allowed to have that conversation, that there's too many lines in the sand have been drawn. That's why we need to transcend politics. We need to work together as a true unified coalition of the 99%.
Let me elaborate more on the 90%. Most of it is like economically, I see some Republicans and I agree on some things, like obviously lowering taxes, but it's 90% on the social issues. like abortion, same-sex marriage, drugs. That's where I see disagreement.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to all those, like, do whatever you want. I don't care. And there's some other people in terms of abortion. I mean, I'm pro-life, but I see it as, I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to tell someone what they can or cannot do with their body. Some people call it being pro-choice, and no, that's called being pragmatic.
Yeah, well, it's also a violation of the First Amendment. If you're making a decision for somebody else that isn't you, and by the way, this is funny because two men talking about abortion, right?
Yeah.
I think right there's the biggest problem. Women need to have control over their own bodies because they barely have control over most of everything else in our society, which is a huge, huge problem. And I want to hit on that for a little bit because in my organization that I'm trying to build, like I said, this collaborative effort, we're calling ourselves the Ronan Warriors right now just because we need to get some name recognition out there, right?
Yep.
But essentially, we're trying to build an app which we're going to call our voice. And the most prominent and prolific members of my team so far, the volunteers that have stepped up to the plate and taken leadership roles, have been women, honestly. And it's only because I don't think I've had a woman coder that she's not in charge of my technology thing either. But seriously, like, women do not get nearly enough credit in our country. And they have to deal with so much more BS than we do. Honestly, women CEOs got there not just because they're good and talented, but because they had to go through every other hurdle and hoop that they were thrown at on top of that. So you take away those restraints, we wouldn't be able to keep up with women. That's just a fact in this country.
Yeah.
And so, like, the abortion and pro-choice and Planned Parenthood and all this, that, and the other, this is literally a war on women. And I'm not saying that to insult your political party. I'm saying that it's a fact.
I mean, you're not insulting my party. You're bringing up an excellent point. Like when you mention millennials being a Democratic Party, what I think when it comes to millennials wanting to be part of a party, there are some people I know who said, if Bernie wasn't running, would have supported Rand Paul. But when it comes to that, when I saw on stage, Rand Paul sounded like the adult in the room. And watching Rand Paul debate, they're talking about the drug war. And I knew that almost all people on the stage are going to say, throw him in jail. But then you saw Rand Paul saying, hey, maybe let's try criminal justice reform, because he's doing that with Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker, the Redeem Act,
right,
which sadly was never passed.
Right.
And when I saw him talk about that, I was like, oh, that was bold.
Right.
He had some guts to talk about that, because in a Republican debate, normally you'd hear people say escalate the drug war or ban all drugs. Say, hey, maybe, because, I don't see any problem with someone having a bag of pot in their car. They weren't killing anybody. They weren't hurting anyone. Same with most drugs.
Yeah, most drugs it's an addiction. We need to treat it as the medical problem that it is, not as a criminal offense. The only criminals in the drug community are the ones who are distributing it.
Dealers.
They're the ones, and the traffickers and this, that, and the other, because it usually ties in. But those are the people that need to be in prison. Everybody else is a victim. And in terms of marijuana, well, we've proven time and time again that there's actual medicinal uses for it. This much more THC, this much less THC, what have you. But recreationally, there's also no reason against it. It's just like alcohol or cigarettes. And the problem is, it was right after World War II, right before World War II, when they got banned. It was America's #1 cash crop. The hemp industry, marijuana as a recreational drug, or like tobacco and alcohol, that was standard rule of thumb in our country up until that ban. And we've lost so much economic potential because of it. The thing is, like you said, Rand Paul was the adult in the room. I was the adult in the room on the debate stage, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is sensationalism. The problem is all these lines in the sand and having to be so up the rear of the political party's mantra and platform that there is no more room to wiggle. And people are sick and tired of it. And you see that with low voter turnout over and over again. So what we have to do is galvanize people to not just give a damn, but to get civically engaged. You know what I mean? To truly vote and understand that their vote does matter. And the main reason why people don't, I think, is because they lack the information. A lot of the information is also not readily available. If you wanted to run in this county for, mayor, county commissioner, engineer, or whatever, it's not necessarily readily available. There isn't a Montgomery County political, this is how you do it website. You have to go to the Board of Elections, and even then some of them don't have the right answers. Or that it's only on a paper copy, so they'll have to get back to you. We need to digitize our structure. We need to be a part of the 21st century in government, and we're not. So that's my mission right now.
When I saw watching all of the debates, like regardless of party, like I watched some Democrat debates to do some do talking points on my show, because I have people like on my shows like, I don't care what party you're part of, but if we can have an honest discussion, then that'd be fun. But watching both parties, it's like as if we're stuck in the 1980s and 90s, because especially with the Republican Party, because all they're trying to do is just mirror what Ronald Reagan did. And if you look at the statistics, Reagan was horrible.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I have these conversations, like I was actually a victim of that. I thought Ronald Reagan was one of the top presidents of the United States until I started looking at his policies and the economic impact that they had. Yes, maybe the trickle-down thing initially worked because maybe it was actually implemented the way it was supposed to be, which truly, if you really look at trickle-down economics, as in the theory of trickle-down, it's profit sharing. You work for company X, they make a profit, they share a percentage of that profit with you, and you make more money because of it, on top of your paycheck. That is in itself the solution to our economic problems. If you're working for McDonald's, which is a multi-billion-dollar international corporation, and you're getting $8.50 an hour, but like we just said, multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's, 2 million employees, let's just say. 1 billion divided by 2 million is already, $50?
Yeah.
$50 a month, a year, or whatever. That's not nothing. It's something, but it's still more than what you would have had. And of course, that was just a rough guesstimate, but I know for a fact that most corporations that are large employers, you would be able to get thousands of dollars in annual kickbacks if they actually did profit share.
Okay, a few weeks ago, former Labor Secretary to President Obama, Tom Perez, was named the successor to Debbie Wasserman Schultz as chairperson of the DNC. With Tom Perez now at the helm, what direction do you see the party going in?
And again, I have nothing but my respect for Tom Perez as an individual and as a person. But that being said, as soon as Tom Perez was elected, Dem exit 2.0, we lost 4 million people more from the party. And it's because of that perception of him being a corporate shill. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying he's establishly solid. I'm not saying any of that.
It gives the impression.
There's that impression. Secondly, within his tenure of being DNC chair, he has done nothing he hasn't offered an apology to progressives. He hasn't opened the doors to them. He, in fact, doubled down and blamed Russia on national television again for the problems. If he does not start embracing the proverbial suck, as in the problems of the party, and deliberately trying to fix and address them publicly and transparently, the party is either going to, at worst, stagnate to where it already is, or it will continue to decline and eventually fall. We have seen in our country that major political parties can collapse and become part of history, the Whigs being a primary example. My concern and my fear is it is the latter that would occur, that the party eventually crumbles and falls. Our credibility continues to diminish, and people continue to leave the party in droves, but without any sense of organization and structure, they can only begrudgingly vote for their Democratic counterparts, or they end up going to the Republican Party.
And I saw that when I saw that Tom Perez was elected, I was like, okay, nothing's going to change here. Because with Hillary Clinton, it's like she was ultimate establishment, even though she tried to paint herself as non-establishment because she's a woman, even though it's like, okay, you're not fooling anyone.
Well, I think with Hillary Clinton as president, the worst thing we could have expected from her is 8 more years of Obama, or 4 more years of Obama. Best case scenario, Bernie Sanders would be able to drag her to the left. So at worst, we would have 8 more years of the Obama administration, 4 more years, presuming she would get reelected. That's typically how our election system works. She's president for 8 years. I don't think we've had a one-term president in a long, long time.
I believe it was, the last one I believe was HW.
HW? So that was what? Almost 30 years.
It was 1992, and that was when Ross Perot was running for the first time. And there are a lot of Republicans who haven't forgiven Ross Perot ever since, because in that election, that's when we got Bill Clinton.
Got it. So 92, that's 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's almost been 3 decades since we've had one term. Anyway, Hillary Clinton, at worst, would have given us 8 more years of Obama. At best, Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement, which wouldn't have hemorrhaged as harshly at that point, I think. Not necessarily saying all the Dem Xers would have came back, they really wouldn't have. But I'm saying, worst case scenario, the progressive movement would have had a chance. I'm saying it would have been successful. I'm saying there would have been a chance to drive her to the left. At worst, it would have been more Obama. Now, that all notwithstanding, you're right about Perez and the party stagnating if he doesn't take initiative. And I'm really concerned that that is what's going to happen. And again, I don't necessarily think he's doing it vindictively. I think a lot of the Democratic leadership and higher authority, I think they have their hands tied. I honestly think that the party system is so mired and centralized in its own rules and insider dealings that any sort of movement away from that would upset the entire balance, and they feel like it would collapse. And they're right, it would collapse. But in its collapse would emerge the progressive movement, which is exactly what they need. They need a rebranding. They need a rebirth. And I'm not saying I'm the person to do it, but I'm saying until somebody else shows up or until they give me a phone call, that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, it's also when I remember watching the Democratic National Convention, I watched both conventions, that basically Hillary didn't really fire up the crowd. It was Bernie Sanders and I saw him speak, and everyone, it was like as if it was night and day. It was like as if like the Weeknd just came on the stage where everyone was going crazy. And it was weird because you saw, okay, this guy, even though he wasn't really known that well, he almost toppled Hillary Clinton, and he got more support because traditionally he goes more with what Democrats have really wanted: universal health care. And Hillary Clinton, she's basic, in my opinion. I mean, no, this is a little harsh, but she's basically Dick Cheney in a dress.
Well, and that brings up a very valid point, too, because, like you said, Ron Paul was the adult in the room. Jeb Bush was... Rand Paul, sorry. Rand Paul was the chosen one in the Democratic Party. He was the adult in the room for the Republicans. Jeb Bush was the chosen one. And who were the ones that were getting all the press? Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, John Kasich, and Donald Trump for being ridiculous, for being sensational. And Bernie Sanders was popular because, not for being ridiculous, he was popular because he was well-spoken. He was saying the things that people wanted to hear. He was inspirational. And we saw the same thing with the DNC chair race. Most of my fellow candidates were not very inspiring. They weren't. They had great things to say, but they weren't able to articulate it in a way that would get people on board. Tom Perez, he spoke very loudly and passionately, but that wasn't necessarily inspiring. Keith Ellison, I think, was far more inspiring in that regard because he was very laid back, calm, relaxed, and he was able to garner some support that way. I think Jamie Harrison was close in the same regard. It's just when everything's painted as a two-person race, the likes of Jamie Harrison and Sally Boynton Brown and myself, we always get pushed to the wayside, And the problem is also delivery. Sally had an 11-page plan. That was absolutely the plan that we needed to implement for the party, but nobody wants to read it. Jamie Harrison, he's a good guy, but so is Keith Ellison, and Keith Ellison got the Bernie support. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it all comes down to what we saw this year in politics was the image. It was truly the spectacle. For the first time in our nation's history, the spectacle is what won. Because during the 2008 election with Obama and the Republican Party, when Trump tried to run then too, but we saw it with the Alaska governor,
Sarah Palin.
When she started doing her silliness, it tanked all of her options. And, when the Republican Party started acting like a bunch of children, it tanked their opportunities. But because they were able to build on that momentum for 8 years and kind of paint themselves as the extreme patriots.
They're not patriots.
They're not. I'm just saying that's what they've been doing. Yeah. Their propaganda, their messaging is on point. They were able to now paint themselves in their caricature and mockery of what politics should be like.
In watching when they're saying that, Obama's weak, like, are you kidding me? We're bombing 7 places. We dropped almost 27,000 bombs last year.
Yeah. So he deported 2.5 million immigrants. He kept the country from collapsing twice from the economic recession and still managed to overcome the sequester thanks to ridiculously outlandish Republican obstructionism throughout the entire process. I mean, say what you will about Obama, he wasn't the second coming of Christ, and he didn't give us quite the amount of hope and change we were hoping for, but he kept our country together. He brought gas prices down, and he improved the quality of life of most Americans. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, that's the measuring stick we need to hold up to him. Yeah, he proliferated and extended the war in Iraq, and he bombed Syria, this, that, and the other. Sure, hold him accountable for those things, but also give the man credit where credit is due.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started to vote, I was kind of like I had the blinders, like, oh, Republicans are always right, Democrats are always wrong. But I was also 18 at the time.
Right, and that's our cultural problems. I thought I was Republican until I started putting in my beliefs into like that, that scale. Like, which one of these candidates do you most closely align to? And when it showed up Bernie Sanders, I was like, what?
Wait.
He's a liberal. He's a Democrat. And I love it. Like, how's universal health care not conservative? Yeah. How's universal education not conservative? How is improving the quality of life not conservative? Because, silly me, I thought conservatism meant conserving society. Eisenhower, policies, FDR, I thought that was conservative policy. Apparently, that's the little pipe dreams now.
Yeah, and the thing is, Republicans always want to look up to Reagan. It's like, Eisenhower was better by a mile, and I think he's one of the only Republicans to ever balance an actual budget, plus he introduced infrastructure.
Right. And you got Roosevelt. I mean, you got Teddy Roosevelt. You got, during the South, he was the one that hammered the time between the railroads. Grant.
I think it was Ulysses?
Yeah, Ulysses Grant.
Okay.
I mean, there are plenty of Republican and conservative leaders and heroes that we can look up to. Reagan, like you said, is not necessarily one of them.
He expanded Medicaid 4 times. And they're always looking at him as this conservative icon. It's like, if you want a conservative icon, sure, Eisenhower was a little bit more liberal than most Republicans in the past, but he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. And he was a general. He's obviously led a nation in terms of a military structure and improved it. Like, the man obviously wanted to improve people's quality of life, and to me, that's what conservatism is all about. Liberal ideology is supposed to take what already exists and expand upon it or evolve it. Conservatism is to ensure that the bottom line is taken care of. And now it's turned into conservatism means giving as much money to the 1% as possible.
And also part of it is like conservatism is giving a lot of money to the military-industrial complex.
Right.
And from watching the debates again with Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders being the only adults in the room, saying, maybe we shouldn't give all this money to the military-industrial complex, because while listening to Hillary Clinton, she was basically Republican light.
And I mean, I don't disagree. I'm certainly not on here to defend it.
Yeah.
And being a military member myself, it's not so much that there's so much money being spent in the military and that's the problem. The problem is the money that is being spent isn't being spent wisely. We have the F-35 weapons system, which is essentially a glorified paperweight. We just spent, $800 billion creating a stealth destroyer. I mean, and then the Pentagon lost $6 trillion during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. We need to improve our contracting processes. We need to make sure that the money that is being spent adequately and correctly. And yeah, fraud, waste, and abuse is a problem, but we're not talking about staplers and people stealing, paper from the office. We're talking about wasting resources on overpriced, overly ineffective weapon systems or construction contracts that either serve no purpose, like, for instance, procuring 318 tanks when we were drawing down. No, we don't. We're drawing down. We don't need more tanks. And we had generals in the defense committee, and not even the defense committee, that look, we don't need these tanks. And the congressmen that were in those committees were like, well, too bad, because my constituency or the prime donor from whatever company makes tanks said you do.
And going back to the conservatism, at the time it was like improving quality of life. But if you look at the conservatism of the 21st century, you basically obviously military-industrial complex giving tax cuts to wealthy, but also there's such an evangelical influence in the party. And I know a lot of people my age who want to vote Republican because they like Senator Paul's message. But it's the people like Michelle Bachmann, Sarah Palin, Rick Santorum, or it's kind of like, ew, I don't. Basically, just gives the impression as if you just smelled sour milk.
Right. The Republican Party today is trying to recreate the Dark Ages, honestly. And I will say that
bluntly.
When it's not that I have anything against religion or that I have anything against the wealthy, but when you concentrate power, so much power at the top end, and leave so very little at the bottom, that structure will collapse. Either it'll be taken down by the people who are oppressed, or it'll collapse onto itself because there's nothing else to sustain it. And the problem with emphasizing religion in government is we get the Crusades, which essentially the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Middle East right now, is the Crusades of the 21st century. We cannot allow religion to define our politics because it will become extreme. And when we have people trying to force religious beliefs into legislation, when we are a diverse, melting pot country, it immediately violates every other person in the country who doesn't believe in Christianity or Judaism or the Islamic faith. Whatever person tries to push their religion immediately disavows the separation of churches. So with the Republican Party going in that direction and going in that direction full throttle, it's also very concerning because if you can't have a debate about science, and if you're not going to listen to your scientists because you think, well,
climate change is a joke,
or the Bible says this, or my faith in God is that it will all come around in the end of the day, how are you supposed to govern when facts and reality do not play a part in your decision making?
Yeah, like when it comes to facts and reality, you still have many people believe in like Earth being flat and creation over evolution.
Right.
I mean, you have even...
So wait a minute, the Earth isn't flat.
I mean, obviously, like Ken Ham with the Creation Museum and how he debated Bill Nye. But if a guy as religious and conservative as Pat Robertson says that, yes, evolution is more credible than creation, you know they're getting a little nutty.
And here's the thing, too. It's not that you can't be religious and run for office and have that sense of morality guide your beliefs. It's when you try and legislate the Bible. Then what's the difference between Sharia law and biblical law at that? And that might really get a lot of people to hate me, so hopefully your viewership isn't millions. But the point is, you can't have your cake and eat it in this regard. And having a strong faith simply cannot cloud your judgment. And that's my only argument. And a lot of the argument against abortion, Planned Parenthood, women's right to choose this, that, and the other is religious. Not serving gays and the LGBTQ community is religiously inclined. My belief, so like the Hobby Lobby one, I believe that gay people shouldn't have whatever access, and now their employees are forced to deal with that. That is absolutely ludicrous because now you're saying that corporation has more rights than people and it has the equal rights of people in the first place. So we cannot go down that rabbit hole. And I would rather completely disallow religion in government, period, any sort of mention of it whatsoever, than even risk it taking root and taking control of our Constitution, because that document is a perfect document. It's the interpretation that tends to keep getting convoluted.
Yeah, and like how, like, obviously you have people on the right saying, oh, freedom of speech, and we're all First Amendment. But if you look at the first 10 words, I mean, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion.
There you go. You said it.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you go with it. All right. 2016, Democrats got their bell rung. I mean, they got beat up. Yeah. They lost the Senate, the House, and the presidency, and for the most part, the Supreme Court. The GOP now has 33 out of 50 governorships and 32 out of 50 state legislatures. In your point of view, where did the Democrats go wrong, and what mistakes do you think they made in 2016?
It wasn't just 2016. It's been for 30 years there hasn't been a Democratic presence in rural America, in small towns. And if it is an urban or metropolitan, Democrats apparently don't care anymore. And that's the problem. You can't expect to win elections all up and down the ballot and all across the country if you don't show up. And that's the bottom line. I mean, call it an insider, call it rigged, call it whatever you want. But the bottom line is the Democratic Party has not been present in the lives of American people for decades. And that's why the Republican Party was so easily able to manipulate their voter base into calling us the enemy. Like, honestly, in some places in our country, it is worse to be called a liberal than it is to be a heretic or Satan or any other slur word. Being a liberal is worse than the worst slur word or insult that you can come up with in some parts of our country because of that very same fact.
And also the fact that, I mean, you had a once-in-a-generation candidate in Donald Trump.
Well, that's actually apparently not true because World War II is World War II. We got Kim Jong Un. I mean, we got crazy dictators every single.
And well, where I'm going with this is in a really long time, no one's really ever seen a candidate in American politics like Trump, who's basically, some have called him fascist and compared him to Mussolini.
I mean, I'll go out of my way to say too, he's literally, not to say that you should, it's recommended reading, but Hitler's Rise to Power is completely what Steve Bannon, Sean Spicer, Kellyanne, and him have been doing. They are literally the four. Replace Sean Bannon with Goebbels. You know what I mean? Like, these are the exact characters and figures that allowed the Nazi regime to proliferate and grow. Am I saying that there's going to be death camps in America? No, I'm not saying that. I am saying that the fascism and the totalitarianism is well underway in just 6 weeks. And we've seen that by Sean Spicer limiting who can have access at the press conferences. We've seen that by calling Fox, CNN, ABC, and NBC, and all these other news networks fake news. We're seeing the attack and the war on journalism and their base eating it up, even though they're still watching Fox News. They're making it all this one credible source. The only truth is my truth, and that is the slippery slope.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call Fox News actual news.
I mean, I wouldn't either, but I'm saying, like, that's the point, though. That is exactly the point. Fox News brands themselves as the only news network, and the Trump administration is supporting that fallacy.
Yeah.
And the viewership continues to go there as if it were the real truth.
And watching, I'm guilty as charged. I've seen maybe once in a great while just to see some of the ridiculousness. But then you've got like the right wing. I mean, kind of got like Hannity, who says, "Oh, journalism's dead." It's like, oh no, it's actually calling out Trump because of something he either said that was stupid. And basically, if a Republican is called out, then they'll cry bias.
Right.
If they call out a Democrat, then it's like fantastic journalism.
And see, that's the thing. Like, that is the divide that I'm talking about. Like, I will give Republicans this much credit. Their propaganda machine is amazing. We have not seen anything like it since World War II. We have literally, and I'm talking even the positive propaganda of the United States to galvanize our country to go into the war. Mm-hmm. Getting attacked by the Japanese in Pearl Harbor, that was a galvanizing agent, but the propaganda that we proliferated thereafter was pretty damn on point. But like the Nazi propaganda, Germans thought they were winning the war right up until Americans were marching down Berlin. You know what I'm saying? Like, we haven't seen that kind of propaganda since World War II, and the Republicans have got it to a masterful perfection. And it's terrifying because if their message was one of unity and peace and bringing us all together and improving our quality of life, that would be perfect. We wouldn't have to have these conversations. I could sit at home. I could be in the military living out my 20 years, But they're trying to repeal the civil rights movement, women's suffrage. They're trying to repeal all of the social progress we've made and literally return it back to a feudalist society, like a true feudalist society. Like, Dark Ages feudalism is what their propaganda is propagating.
And also, like you're saying, their propaganda is very, very good because, like, when Trump said how he likes to grab women and a bunch of other things, that could have tanked anyone's campaign.
It should have tanked anyone's campaign.
But I don't know how Trump did it, but somehow he got everyone to ignore what he just said and basically just ended up winning. And on election night, I thought I was high because it's like my first impression was, okay, this wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to be Hillary Clinton basically wipes the floor with Donald Trump and we have our first female president.
That is exactly correct. And the thing is, and this goes back to your question, what does the Democratic Party do now? How do they fix it? Why have they been losing? They haven't been standing up for themselves. The spine of the Democratic Party is non-existent now. Whether that's because we're not good at sound bites, whether that's because we're a bunch of thinkers and doers rather than soundbite specialists, I don't really know. But we have not stood up to the Republican messaging at all. Our own message is they're the bad guys. Our message and their message has the same words in it, Republican. So we can't possibly win an argument if we're using them as our counter-argument. We have to say, what are we bringing to the table? And we haven't. That's what I tried doing, and that's what Bernie Sanders tried doing, and that's what Obama did to get elected. But as a party, we just haven't been doing it. We need to, all those millions of dollars that we're raising from corporate interests and those consultants that we're paying millions of dollars to tell us that how to lose elections, apparently, we need to spend that money on a PR specialist that can help us rebrand because, quite frankly, granted, at this point, it's as simple as saying, you know what, we screwed up. I almost said that word. All the Liberal Party needs to do right now if they truly want to get back into power and take back the message and the narrative, is say, we screwed up, we get it, our doors are open, help us. If that's what they do now and truly embrace it and follow through, we win, period. But until that happens, we're Republican-like.
Traditionally, Democratic Party has been the party of working class Americans. But however, this time around, Donald Trump painted himself as like pro-working class and populist. It was a facade.
Oh, no. But that actually isn't why working class America voted for him. What we've seen is the decline in unions and their liberal leanings, their connections. Most working class Americans now more associate with the Republican Party for many of the reasons that you said. It's just, that's how I grew up. That was my mom and my dad. And like what I said, I thought these things were conservative. So until you educate yourself on realizing that social justice is liberal and fiscal responsibility is conservative, you're going to vote Republican because you think that the fiscal conservatism is what defines the entire party. And that, oh yeah, no, Republicans, we get along. Hey, look, I got friends of various diverse and ethnic groups because you do. I do. We all do. Mm-hmm. But what we fail to realize is that that's actually a liberal thing. And if we keep voting, and again, it's not to hammer on the Republican Party, it's just at this point in the game, Republicans have no other interest other than their own. So despite that, though, it goes back to the propaganda. People have been led to believe that Republicans are the family values, that all things patriotic and freedom related in America. And because of that, a lot of union workers, laborers, blue-collar people who do like to go hunting, who do like to shoot guns, who do value their family life and improving their quality of life. All these things have been messaged for 30 years by the Republican Party, but they don't even realize anymore that they have been hoodwinked. And that's the point. If the liberals and the Democrats had actually kept pace and said, nah, we're not going to let you take that. Because, truth be told, all of the social improvements and all the programs to facilitate quality of life come from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and during the campaign, Trump was basically railing on every single trade deal that Hillary Clinton did. That's what won him the election. Is he was basically bad mouthing every trade deal and was doing these speeches at factory towns who, because of those trade deals, all their jobs got sent overseas. And then you saw Hillary Clinton, who initially supported calling it the gold standard of trade deals, but then hated it because Bernie Sanders pushed her to the left of it.
Right. See, and that, again, makes her a weak candidate in that. The same reason why I was able to push Tom Perez and Keith Ellison to the left as well in the debates. And that was also me. The point is, if you're trying to be this leader and you're not actually the one driving the discussion, for all intents and purposes, and better or worse, Trump proved his leadership qualities by driving the message home on the Republican Party. What kind of leadership does that make him in the Republican Party? Obviously, we're seeing the fruits of that particular labor. That being said, nobody pushed him anywhere. And it wasn't even an arrogance or an ignorance that didn't allow him to push it. He was the one dominating the discussion. Bernie Sanders was the one dominating this discussion. There was nothing that Hillary offered him to make him change his views because there was no reason to. Just like there was nothing that they could have said to make me push my views. Like, how are they going to push me to the right and say, you know what, having the primaries rigged, pushing Bernie Sanders out, denying progressives a chance to speak in Philadelphia, that was actually a good thing.
No, it's horrible.
Exactly. So, if you have bad ideas, it's going to come to fruition. You either have to admit that and embrace it or move on. So,
at one point in an interview with Bloomberg, he even said he wants to transform the GOP into a workers' party.
Well, they are going to be a workers' party, a slave workers' party.
That is good. See, when I saw that, there's technically two schools of thought. Obviously, you got the ones that are socialist, like you find in Europe and North Korea. But you've got the really far-right nationalist workers' parties. And I think when it comes to the GOP, they're going more towards the nationalist.
Right, which is a very, very scary thing because things in moderation, right? All things in moderation. That includes patriotism.
Yeah.
All right? And nationalism is the extreme version of patriotism. I love my country.
Yeah.
I'm willing to lay down my life today for my country. But I also am aware that my country is heading into a very, very dark place. And I'm going to do everything within my power to prevent that from happening. That's patriotism. Nationalism is saying, oh, Trump's the president and we got to do everything he says for America. That's nationalism. That's blind loyalty. That's what the ISIS is that terrorism? That's an ideology. That's nationalism of whatever their kind of proportions. And that's just, we can't have that.
And what scared me when it came to, obviously, the nationalist view of the GOP now, you saw Trump in debates. This should have knocked him out. If people had a sense of morality, Trump basically said, yeah, I want to kill the families of ISIS. He said that on national television, but they had Rand Paul say, if you advocate for that, then we have to pull out of the Geneva Convention.
And what would that do? What kind of message would that send?
That would send we're horrible people.
Well, it would also allow other nations to do the same thing. And some of those countries that are on the Geneva Conventions were exactly the ones that were committing the atrocities.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Japanese internment camps were a good thing. They weren't. But that's also a deterrent for allowing us to ever do that again. Now, granted, the Geneva Conventions, right? What's happening in Sandy Hook right now? We are violating Native American rights on their sovereign soil. We are attacking our own citizens violently and imprisoning them, taking away their Fifth Amendment rights and their First Amendment right to peacefully assemble. Because I can tell you from having been there twice.
You were at Standing Rock?
I was at Standing Rock twice.
Wow.
Once before the election and once during the DNC race. But despite all that, I'm just saying, these people are peacefully assembling. They are literally praying. They are literally pitching tents, singing Kumbaya, and telling stories to protest that oil thing. And they are being brutally vandalized and violated by these officers. So that, to me, is a violation of the Geneva Conventions. And yet, no other country can say anything because guess what? The United States of America is the single strongest entity in the world. No holds barred.
Yeah, and when going back to the social justice, a lot of people that I know really look down at social justice because when I've asked people about social justice, what first came to mind was the whole safe space, trigger warning, microaggression.
Right.
And if you look at social justice for what it actually is supposed to be, it's for saying, okay, let's not be barbaric, let's be civil. But you have as I like to say, authoritarian left, because you see on college campuses people saying, I'll allow you to talk as long as you agree with me.
Right. And the thing about social justice is that, as I've seen, and I think as we've all seen, is that everybody wants change, not very many people want to do something about it. Everybody wants to be the hero, but nobody wants to work together. What we've seen is too many good intentions not coming to fruition because of egos, because of personalities, because of misguidedness. And that's truly the most depressing thing, because the progressive movement, the 99%, the vast majority of Americans don't care about either political party or their ideology. They just want to be able to go to work, put food on their table, keep a roof over their heads, and enjoy whatever life they have and enjoy whatever hobby they have. That's what people want. You want to know why I can say that? Because that's what I want. That's what you want.
Yeah.
If we had that written out in a sentence and said, is this what you want to everybody in the country, yes or no? I highly freaking doubt anybody would say no. And if you did, then, well, I don't know. What do you want?
And when it comes to Occupy, obviously with 99% Occupy Wall Street, what it had, there are a lot of movements which I've seen that it's good in intention, but it was just carried out not that well. Mm-hmm. You had people with, obviously with Occupy Wall Street, basically they were just destroying everything in sight.
Well, even so, you had Occupy Wall Street, right? Mm-hmm. And then you did. All those hundreds of thousands of people were there. They did the thing, and then what? Nothing happened. You can't protest. You can't. Let's say they had gone the whole 9 yards and completely overthrew New York City. Just completely drugged Rudy Giuliani out on the street and killed him. Mm-hmm. Took the governor out on the street and killed him. If you don't replace them, if you don't do anything meaningful beyond saying, we're here, we're mad, get used to it, then there is no incentive for these people to listen. That's the problem. Our First Amendment right to peacefully assemble has no teeth or merit if we can't actually leverage that thing we're trying to protest for.
Okay, you're part of Justice Democrats.
No, I'm not part of Justice Democrats. I've spoken with them, and I've been reached out by them. I've spoken with various of the progressive movements. I'm still, for all intents and purposes, I'm still a Democrat, but I'm trying to reform them. I'm not a party token guy. I'm trying to be like, hey guys, I'm still here, and I'm still telling you need to fix this, and you're not. That's what I am. I'm trying to build an app, and it's going to be called something. I have an organization, so to speak, but Really and truly, I'm literally just trying to facilitate the conversations and the collaboration.
Yes. What messages or words of wisdom would you want to send millennials, like basically people our age, looking into trying politics like yourself?
Don't.
Don't.
No, you got to get involved. But the problem is, it's very, very difficult. And I'm not saying that it's too hard to do. No, I'm saying like the time investment and the financial investment that you would have to personally make is usually insurmountable. You need a team. You need somebody to get your back. You need a network. And the problem is the parties are supposed to provide that to you. That's the whole point of having a party. But even the Republicans, like whoever wins at the end of the day of the primary, you get the Republican support, period. But until then, you're on your own. And the Democrats, they take it a step further. You're not going to get their support during the primary. You're only going to get their support during the general if you're one of the top 6 or if you're one of the insiders. So for us regular folk trying to get involved, we need the information, we need the tools and the resources, and we simply don't have it. And building it from scratch, I can tell you personally, is not fun, which is exactly why I'm building this app.
And also with these words, when you were talking about campaigns, of all the political campaigns I've seen, Hillary Clinton ran the worst campaign you can ever find, because I was watching all of her ads. All it was just calling out Donald Trump for swearing and saying naughty language. It's like everyone here says naughty language.
To ask about campaigns, I'm also looking into doing town halls on Facebook. So, I mean, I'll do my quick shout out to where to find me. You can find me at Twitter on Ronan, 4 progress. And Facebook, it's the same public page, /Ronan for DNC. I didn't change it because a lot of the other interviewers were just posting that from the past. So we're going to keep it for now. And my website, www.thejoesinitiative.org. That's where all our collaboration pages are. And the thing is, I love having these conversations. I am ecstatic every time somebody messages me and asks, hey, how do I get involved? How do I run for office? What can I do? What do you recommend? I love having those conversations because maybe not 100 times individually in one day.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's why I want these town halls, because I want to share this information. I have acquired knowledge and a skill that I want to share with the rest of whoever wants it.
And going, obviously doing campaigns and watching Hillary Clinton do the stronger together, break barriers.
It's all platitudes unless you actually follow through.
Yeah, and most of it is, okay, you're just trying to hand the election to Donald Trump. But there were some times where Trump kind of had a bad week where he insulted a Gold Star family. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was thinking, oh, okay, now you're just trying to hand the election to Hillary Clinton. There are some times where I thought if he was just trying to bomb it intentionally. And I was watching before Trump even announced, I was watching Conan one night, and the celebrity survey said when Bill Clinton called Donald Trump, I think it was Jeb Bush said he's trying to disrupt the GOP. Marco Rubio said he's trying to sabotage. It said for Hillary Clinton, Bill was probably trying to call Melania, but Trump picked up instead.
Oh my God.
And when it comes to Bill, Hillary never stepped foot in Wisconsin.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Bill was telling her, if you don't step Wisconsin, Trump's going to win this. He's going to win this state. But they saw Bill more as a liability than someone who was actually saw more as a liability than an advisor. And if I were a candidate, I would listen to Bill Clinton because he's won 2 elections and he won them very decisively.
And, the thing about Clinton, or Bill specifically, is that he is incredibly popular. Despite the scandal, despite, NAFTA and all that, people love the man. And they didn't even leverage his popularity problem. We can sit here and talk all day about what Hillary could have done better. I agree, there's a lot. She could have literally picked anybody other than Tim Kaine to be her VP. Literally anybody off the street. She could have literally done a better job picking a hobo. Which I don't know if that's probably insensitive.
She could have picked you.
Yeah. She could have picked me, some guy, and I would have had a better image for the VP than Tim Kaine, who was he's a former DNC chairman for crying out loud.
He kind of came off as that goofy sitcom dad who picks up his daughter from soccer practice.
He came off as just another white guy. First of all the people she could have picked, Elizabeth Warren, Tulsi Gabbard, Nina Turner, Tim Canova.
I never heard of Tim Canova.
Tim Canova was one of the congressional candidates in Florida. He got Bernie's endorsement. He's one of the leaders of the progressive movement. He's one of the bigger names in it anyway. And I'm just saying, of all the people she could have picked, she picked that guy. Nobody heard of Tim Kaine.
No, I didn't even hear of Tim Kaine. I follow this stuff all the time. When I was watching the VP debate between Mike Pence and Tim Kaine, some labeled it on Twitter the Thrilla in vanilla, because you have porridge and prune juice running against each other. And Mike Pence, what I think helped him, they said that for the polls that he won. But Tim Kaine, factually, he came off more factual. But he came off annoying. And he was just interrupting every 10 seconds. And this guy is so. I think that honestly hurt Hillary's campaign. And
it did. Him existing in her campaign hurt her campaign. Like there is no ifs, ands, or buts about how foolish it was to pick that person. Literally, anybody else in the country would have done it better. She could have picked a freaking Republican, and that would at least send a message of unity, for God's sake.
Yeah, and I told a friend of mine, I told him, House of Cards is going to be a reality if Tim Kaine blows this.
A House of Cards is if Hillary Clinton were nearly as ruthless as Frank was.
Oh, but Hillary, some people think that. I mean, I'm not one of them, honestly. It's history, so why should we discuss it? Some think that Hillary hired a hit on Vince Foster because they saw that how convenient that he ended his life before he goes on trial.
Yeah, well, they said Hillary's been assassinating people since day one, and with all the interviews that keeps bringing Hillary up and me in the process and me saying that Hillary could have done better, I should be, face down in a ditch somewhere too.
And since the GOP looks flat out decimated right now, who do you think should run 2020?
On the GOP too?
No, DNC.
I mean, honestly, it would have to be one of the progressive movement folks. If Christine Pelosi can truly leverage her progressive weight and truly start embracing it, she would have a solid chance. Right now, Tulsi Gabbard has a very solid chance of getting on the ticket. Elizabeth Warren would have to rebuild her image that was slightly tarnished in the past election before she would be viable. Bernie Sanders making a second run for it, I think we would still see the same result.
I don't see it. I'm sorry. He's going to be about 80 years old at that time, and there's a time where it's come on, Bernie, hang it up.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The new blood definitely has to run. But as far as the major players go, there's only a couple, and they're not establishment.
You'll definitely see more this next time around. You'll see more establishment. You'll see they didn't learn their lesson, because Washington Post was even saying, "Oh, hey, let Tim Kaine run in 2020." And if he were the nominee, oh my goodness, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump would just beat him. I could see him putting Tim Kaine in a corner, because Tim Kaine came off as goofy, boring. Then you have Donald. If you watch it, if anyone watched him in the primaries, he was verbally abusing every candidate. But it was really funny watching him going up against Jeb Bush, because there's one time where Trump mocked him for his poll numbers. There's one I was like, yeah, I'm at 42, you're at 3. When you first started, you were right here. Now you keep going further and further. Pretty soon you're going to fall off the stage. I was like, man.
That's why I said it was the theatrics of it. And Donald Trump is nothing if he isn't a media presence. I mean, he is a celebrity. And his show, The Apprentice. I found myself not quoting "You're fired" anymore, because I used to think it was the most hilarious thing, but now it's
not funny.
It's not funny anymore. It is incredibly terrifying that guy that was famous for saying "You're fired" is the
leader of the free world. If anyone I think should be fired right now, it's Jeff Sessions.
No, there's a laundry list of people that needs to be fired. And it starts with the President of the United States, the Vice President, the Speaker of the House.
Basically everyone.
Everyone who has brought us to where we are today. That entire administration has got to go. Again, Kasich, is not the greatest
candidate, but he was more sane.
He was at least, as far as moderates go in the Republican Party, he was it. I'm not saying that he's done great things for Ohio, because he's absolutely devastated rural America, or rural Ohio, by cutting funding to local municipalities. That's why we've seen an uptick in law enforcement and fining and all that crap, because the state is no longer supporting these local municipalities. So, but, that notwithstanding, if I had to pick between the top 4 Republican candidates,
you pick Kasich?
I'd pick Kasich over all the rest of them, but, man, I never thought I'd say today I wish we had a Bush in office.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to W, I mean, sure, he didn't really come off all that smart, but he came off as kind of like a genuine person.
He came off as a genuine person that drug us into a war for no reason.
Yeah.
And honestly, everything that happened, right? The rising cost of food, the rising cost of gasoline, the rising cost of utilities, the housing bubble that happened as soon as Obama stepped into office, all those things were due to his ineffective governing. Now, I'm not saying the man didn't do good stuff. I'm just saying that, like, as a governor, as a leader, that measuring stick I talked about, improving quality of life, he failed.
He did, but I think what ultimately got him the presidency is obviously the Supreme Court, because they ruled in his favor, and also the fact that Al Gore was boring. Mm-hmm. He had the Clinton scandal held over his head, even though it was ridiculous. But the fact that he just offered nothing. He kept saying put Social Security in a lockbox. But, I mean, what does that mean? Like, what are you going to do to create jobs? What are you going to do for healthcare? And going back to 2020, they're speculating that Cory Booker will run.
No.
Andrew Cuomo, Kirsten Gillibrand. They said, Kirsten Gillibrand is a superstar fundraiser. It's like, yeah, Hillary was a good fundraiser, and look where that led.
Yeah, being a good fundraiser doesn't make you a good leader. I fundraised the least, and I had some of the most variety out of all the candidates in the DNC chair race.
Yeah, I mean, amongst progressive circles, and even someone on YouTube said that you dropped a truth bomb.
Yeah.
You did make a really good point in regards to, hey, let's actually represent people, not people like the Koch brothers. Those types, I mean, you have a new class, the donor class. And one thing I see in regards to millennials is the reason why they don't like politics is they feel, okay, if I'm not a millionaire, then my vote doesn't count.
Yeah, and that's actually, I mean, that was what I was trying to bring up earlier, was the whole feudalism thing. We are trying to bring back the Dark Ages. We're trying to bring back lords and ladies. We saw that was some of the worst economic times in human history. The best economic times were during the FDR administration. Yeah. I mean, socialistic democracy, whatever you want to call it, whatever political policy and economic policy that actually empowers people is the policy we should be doing. I don't give a damn if you call it the pinch pony plan. You got to do something to help people. And if you don't, you're going to lose. And you're going to hurt yourselves in the end. And that's the bottom line.
Oh, my goodness. We've gone 23 minutes over. Hey, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate it.
All right, no problem.